Welcome to your deep dive. This is where we help you extract those crucial insights you need to stay ahead, especially if you're gearing up for UPSC 2025. We're looking at the key updates for April 12th, 2025, Part 1 today. Our goal is to cut through the noise and bring you what really matters.
Yeah, exactly. Think of this as your focused lens on today's most relevant developments.
Right.
Our sources today, they really span quite a range. We've got social schemes, some pretty groundbreaking tech advancements, environmental issues, defense updates.
History, health. It's quite interdisciplinary, which is perfect for UPSC prep.
Absolutely. And you might find some topics feel a bit familiar. Consider it good revision, reinforcing why these things keep coming up.
Yeah, their continued importance. Our aim, as always, is that concise but comprehensive understanding, those aha moments without drowning you in data.
Precisely.
So let's dive straight in. First up, a really fundamental social initiative, the PM-POSHAN scheme.
Yes, PM-POSHAN. It builds on the old midday meal scheme, really a cornerstone for childhood nutrition and education in India.
And the scale is just immense, isn't it?
It really is. We're talking about serving hot-cooked meals to, 11.20 crore children?
Wow.
From Balvatikas right up to Class 8 across over 10 lakh schools. It's a national program with significant reach.
And there's new development here, something about costs.
That's right. A recent hike, actually. A 9.5% increase in material cost allocated per child.
Okay, 9.5%. What does that mean in real terms?
Well, it translates to an extra central government spend of about 954 crore for the financial year 2025-26. And this kicks in from May 1st, 2025.
So the idea is this directly impacts the quality of the meals served on the ground.
That's the intention. It boosts the resources available. For the younger kids, Balvatika and primary, the cost goes up to 6.78 per day.
Up from about 6.19.
Yes. And for the upper primary students, it's up to 10.17 from 9.29.
Okay. They seem like small amounts individually, but across millions of kids.
Exactly. It adds up to a significant investment in, hopefully, better quality food. And remember, these are minimums. States can, and sometimes do, add more from their own budgets.
Right. And these costs are tied to specific nutritional guidelines.
They are. For the primary kids, the goal is at least 20 grams of pulses, 50 grams of veggies, and 5 grams of oil per meal.
And for the older ones?
It increases slightly. 30 grams of pulses, 75 grams of vegetables, and 7.5 grams of oil for upper primary. So it gives a concrete idea of what the meals should contain.
How does the scheme keep up with, rising food prices, inflation?
It's actually quite data-driven. They use data from the Labor Bureau.
Okay.
Specifically, the Consumer Price Index for rural laborers, the CPI-RL. This index tracks price changes in about 600 villages across 20 states.
So it gives a fairly robust picture of rural inflation, which is key for this scheme.
Precise.
Now, PM-POSHAN is crucial, but it's part of a bigger picture of nutrition initiatives, right?
Absolutely. You got to see it alongside POSHAN, which is run by the Ministry of Women and Child Development.
That one focuses more on adolescent girls, pregnant women, mothers, younger kids.
Yes, the 0-6 age group specifically. And then there's Mission POSHAN 2.0. That launched a couple of years back, basically merging POSHAN and the Supplementary Nutrition Program, trying to create a more integrated strategy.
And the funding for these varies.
It does. For POSHAN, the typical split is 60.4 between the center and most states.
But different for the Northeast and Himalayan regions.
Right, 90.N there. And UTs, without legislatures, get 100% central funding.
So stepping back, the big goals for PM-POSHAN and these related schemes, it's really twofold.
I'd say so. First, directly improve the nutritional status of kids, tackle malnutrition.
Which has huge long-term impacts.
Huge.
Yeah.
And second, use that meal as an incentive to boost school enrollment, attendance, keep kids in school, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Makes sense. A healthy meal can make a real difference to whether a child attends school regularly. Okay, let's completely shift gears now. From school meals to, something that sounds like science fiction. Nuclear fusion for space travel. Pulsar Fusion's Sunbird project.
Yes, this is really ambitious stuff. Sunbird is being developed by a British startup, Pulsar Fusion. It's a concept for a rocket powered by nuclear fusion.
And the speeds they're talking about are just mind-boggling.
They really are. Sunbird is theoretically capable of reaching speeds up to 805,000 kilometers per hour.
800,000? That's faster than the Parker Solar Probe, isn't it?
It is. Parker Solar Probe hits about 692,000 kilometers. So Sunbird aims to be significantly faster.
What would that mean for, say, traveling to Mars or even further out?
It would be revolutionary. If it works, you could potentially reach Pluto in just 4 years.
4 years to Pluto.
And a trip to Mars could be cut by nearly half compared to current propulsion. It just opens up so many possibilities for exploration.
Is there a timeline for testing this?
They're aiming for an orbital demonstration in 2027. That'll be the key test. Can the theory work in practice in space?
Okay, maybe a quick physics refresher. Nuclear fusion propulsion. How does it work, and why is it better than, say, chemical rockets or even nuclear fission?
Right, so fusion is what powers the sun. You're forcing light atoms together, like hydrogen isotopes, to make heavier ones, releasing enormous energy.
Unlike fission, which splits heavy atoms.
Exactly, and fusion is generally seen as cleaner, much less long-lived radioactive waste, and potentially far more powerful in terms of energy output per unit of mass. For space, that means much faster trips or carrying heavier payloads.
And there are different ways to use this fusion energy for rockets.
Broadly, yes. 2 main concepts get talked about. First is nuclear thermal propulsion, or NTP.
NTP, how does that work?
Basically, you use a reactor, in this case, maybe a fusion reactor, to heat a propellant, like liquid hydrogen, to extreme temperatures. It becomes a superhot gas or plasma.
And you blast that out a nozzle for thrust.
Precisely. High exhaust velocity. That means better fuel efficiency, potentially carrying much more cargo.
Okay, that's NTP. What's the other main approach?
That's nuclear electric propulsion, or NEP. Here, the reactor generates electricity.
Right.
And that electricity powers electric thrusters, like ion thrusters. These give very gentle thrust, but they can run for a very, very long time.
So you accelerate slowly but steadily to incredible speeds.
Exactly. Great for deep space missions far from the sun where solar panels aren't effective. You need a reactor for consistent power. NEP involves the reactor, power conversion, heat radiators, and the electric thrusters.
So where does Sunbird fit in? Is it NTP or NEP?
Sunbird's design is particularly interesting because it aims for an integrated approach. They call it dual direct fusion drive, or DDFD.
Dual direct.
Yeah, the idea is to directly use the fusion reaction, not just for thrust, but also to generate significant electrical power on board, maybe up to 2 megawatts.
So it could power the ship's systems and instruments as well as provide propulsion?
That's the concept. It's highly ambitious, merging both thrust and power generation directly from the fusion process. If they pull it off, it could be extremely efficient.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, let's bring it back down to Earth, to our oceans, actually. There's a worrying environmental story out of California about sea lions acting aggressively.
Yes, this is quite concerning. Reports of unusual aggression, even attacks on people, seem linked to a neurotoxin from an algal bloom.
A neurotoxin. Okay, first, maybe just a quick primer on sea lions for those less familiar. What are they usually like?
Sure. Sea lions are marine mammals. Part of the Otaridae family. Think seals with external ear flaps. There are 5 species, like the California sea lion, prominent in this story.
Where do they typically live?
Mainly Western North America, from Alaska down to Mexico. You find them on rocky shores, sandy beaches. They're known for using their strong front flippers for swimming. Males often have that thick mane.
And size-wise?
They can get quite large, up to maybe 1,200 pounds. But crucially, they're generally social and not typically aggressive towards humans. This recent behavior is highly unusual. They live about 20, 30 years.
So this aggressive behavior is being linked to a specific toxin.
Yes, a neurotoxin called domoic acid.
Domoic acid. Where does that come from?
It's produced by certain types of microscopic algae dihyme, specifically the genus Pseudonychia. When conditions are right, often with excess nutrients.
Like from pollution runoff. Eutrophication.
Exactly. Eutrophication can fuel these massive algal blooms. The algae produce the domoic acid.
And how does it get into the sea lions?
It moves up the food chain. Small fish eat the toxic algae. Then larger fish, or squid, eat those smaller fish. And then sea lions eat those contaminated fish.
So the toxin accumulates in the sea lions.
Right. It builds up and can cause neurological damage, leading to disorientation, seizures, and this uncharacteristic aggression.
Sea lions must play an important role in the ecosystem, right?
Oh, definitely. As apex predators, they help control populations of fish and other marine life. They're also good bioindicators.
Meaning that their health reflects the overall health of the marine environment.
Precisely. If the sea lions are sick, it often points to broader problems in the ocean.
Are there other major threats they face besides toxic blooms?
Unfortunately, yes. Climate change is a big one, affecting their prey and habitat. Overfishing reduces their food supply, and entanglement in fishing gear and plastic debris is a serious problem.
Any specific conservation status concerns?
Well, the Australian sea lion is actually listed as endangered by the IUCN. So some populations are really struggling.
Does India have a direct role in sea lion conservation?
Not directly with sea lions themselves, as they aren't native here, but India is part of international agreements like the Convention on Migratory Species,
Right.
CMS,
Right.
and protecting our own marine ecosystems through things like the Wildlife Protection Act contributes to overall ocean health, which benefits all marine life, including migratory species.
Okay, let's shift again, this time to environmental regulations within India. There's talk about a new blue category and something called blue washing. What's this about?
This is a potentially significant change from the Central Pollution Control Board, the CPCB. They've introduced this new blue category classification for certain industries.
And it falls under Essential Environmental Services, or EES.
Correct. The issue, or the controversy, arises from what's being termed blue washing.
Blue washing, like greenwashing, but blue. What does it mean here?
It refers to the concern that highly polluting industries might be reclassified into this blue category to make them seem more environmentally friendly than they perhaps are.
And there's a specific example driving this concern.
Yes, the main one is the reclassification of waste to energy, or WTE incineration plants.
WTE, burning garbage for energy. Where were they classified before?
They were firmly in the red category, which is reserved for the most polluting industries based on India's pollution index system.
And now they've been moved to this new blue category.
Exactly. And this blue category is grouped alongside other EES activities like composting, biogas plants, sewage treatment, material recovery facilities.
Activities generally seen as, well, environmentally beneficial or at least less harmful.
Right. So putting WTE incineration, which involves burning municipal solid waste and has significant emissions.
Similar to coal plants in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But burning waste instead.
Yes, similar thermal process. And studies show WTE can have higher CO2 emissions than even coal for the same energy produced, plus other pollutants. Putting that in the blue category alongside composting is what's raising eyebrows.
How does this classification system work generally? The pollution index.
It's managed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, MOEFCC. They calculate a pollution index, or PI score, for different industrial sectors.
Based on what factors?
It considers things like air emissions, water effluent discharges, hazardous waste generation, and resource consumption. Basically, their overall pollution potential.
And the categories are based on the PI score ranges.
Correct. There's white for PI 020, considered non-polluting, green for 2140, orange for 4159, and red for 60 and above, the most polluting.
And WTE incineration was previously, what was its score?
It had a PI score of 97.6, clearly in the red zone.
So moving it from red, 97.6, to blue, the implication is that this could change how these plants are perceived and regulated.
That's the core concern. Reclassification might lead to a perception of lower environmental impact, potentially leading to less stringent monitoring, easier approvals, or reduced public scrutiny compared to when it was in the red category. It's about how environmental impact is framed and managed.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, changing tack again, let's look at India's defense capabilities. There's news about a new missile, the BMO-4.
Yes, unveiled recently at a defense expo in Hyderabad. The BMO-4 is being presented as a next-generation short-range ballistic missile, or SRBM.
Developed by DRDO.
Developed by DRDO, yes. It's seen as boosting India's conventional counterforce capabilities.
What are the key specs we know about?
Well, it's about 10.2 meters long, 1.2 meters in diameter, weighs around 11,500 kilograms. It's a two-stage solid fuel missile.
And the range, warhead.
Range is reported as up to 1,500 kilometers, carrying a conventional warhead of about 500 kilograms. And it's said to be quite accurate, with a CEP circular error probability of around 30 meters.
How is it launched?
It uses an indigenous six-wheel transport erector launcher, or TLL, so it's mobile, which helps with survivability.
And it includes modern features, like canisterization.
Yes, it's canisterized. That means it's stored and launched from a sealed container. Big advantage there is reduced launch prep time, better readiness.
Anything else technologically significant?
One key feature highlighted is the incorporation of a common hypersonic glide body, or CHGB.
A hypersonic glide body.
What does that do?
It allows the warhead stage to maneuver at hypersonic speeds, Mach 5 or more, within the atmosphere after separating from the booster.
Making it much harder to track and intercept.
Exactly. It makes the trajectory unpredictable. enhancing its ability to penetrate sophisticated enemy air defenses, what they call anti-accessoria denial or A2AD systems.
And it's designed to be upgradable.
Yes, the report suggests the design allows for future integration of new warheads, better sensors, maybe improved propulsion, keeping it relevant as threats evolve.
DRDO, just briefly, their role. The Defense Research and Development Organization, India's main military R&D agency, established back in 1958. Their motto is Balasya Mulam Vigyanam. Strength's origin is science.
Right.
They develop a huge range of technologies for the armed forces across various clusters, aeronautics, armaments, electronics, naval systems, and so on. The BMO-4 is another example of their work.
Okay, now let's pause and reflect on a pivotal figure from India's social history. Mahatma Jyotiba Phule. His birth anniversary was recently commemorated.
Indeed, a truly remarkable social reformer, educator, and writer from 19th century Maharashtra, born April 11, 1827 in Pune.
Known primarily for fighting caste discrimination and gender inequality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He belonged to the Mali caste himself and received education at a Scottish mission school, which exposed him to liberal ideas. But a personal experience of caste humiliation in 1848 really fueled his lifelong activism.
And his wife, Savitribai Phule, was just as important in this work, wasn't she?
Immensely so. Savitribai is celebrated as India's first female teacher. Together, they were a powerhouse for social change. They opened the very first school for girls in Pune in 1848.
Groundbreaking for that time.
Absolutely revolutionary. They faced immense opposition, but persevered, opening more schools for girls and for children from marginalized castes, even night schools for laborers.
What were some of his other major contributions?
Well, a huge one was founding the Satyakshosak Samaj, the Society of Truth Seekers, in 1873.
What was its purpose?
To challenge the caste system, promote equality, rational thinking. Crucially, it was open to everyone, regardless of caste or religion.
He also championed women's rights beyond education.
Yes, very strongly. He advocated for widow remarriage, fought against child marriage and female infanticide. He saw the liberation of women and Shudras Atishudras as interconnected.
And he was a writer, too.
A powerful writer. His book, Gulamgiri, Slavery, drew parallels between caste oppression and slavery in America. Shetkariacha Sud, Cultivator's Whip, highlighted the plight of farmers. He fiercely critiqued Brahmanical orthodoxy.
There's a famous quote of his about education.
Yes, highlighting the chain reaction. Lack of education leads to lack of wisdom, which leads to lack of morals, which leads to a lack of progress, which leads to a lack of wealth, which ultimately ruins the lower classes. It underscores his core belief in education as the key to upliftment.
Such a powerful and enduring message. Let's move now to an unusual natural sight, bioluminescent blue waves spotted in Kochi, Kerala. Beautiful, but maybe concerning.
Exactly. Visually stunning, this Kavaru as it's known locally, but it often signals underlying ecological issues.
So bioluminescence, that's just organisms making their own light.
Pretty much. Caused by a chemical reaction within the organism. It can be bacteria, fungi, algae, often triggered by disturbance, like waves.
And in Kochi, the culprit is usually
Noctiluca scintillans, a type of single-celled marine plankton, a dinoflagellate, also known as knee sparkle.
How does it glow blue?
Through chemical reactions inside tiny structures called scintillons. Blue is the most common color, though sometimes it can look reddish, typically seen March to May there.
What causes these blooms to happen?
It's often linked to eutrophication, that excess nutrient load we discussed earlier, from sewage, runoff. Also, specific salinity levels, rising temperatures, maybe less rainfall, concentrating nutrients.
And if the bloom gets too dense, you mentioned red tides earlier.
Right, if the concentration gets really high, say over 500,000 cells per liter, it can become a harmful algal bloom, or HAB.
What makes them harmful?
They can deplete oxygen in the water, leading to hypoxia, which kills fish. They can release substances like ammonia. Some blooms produce toxins that accumulate in shellfish.
Like the domoic acid affecting the sea lions?
Sometimes, yes, or other toxins like alexandrium, which cause paralytic shellfish poisoning. So these blooms can impact biodiversity, fisheries, aquaculture, and even human health. Fishing communities suffer economic losses too.
Are there other places in India known for this?
Yes, Alleppey backwaters in Kerala also see it, and the Pichavara mangroves in Tamil Nadu are another well-known spot.
Okay, shifting to geopolitics now. The Taiwan Strait, always a sensitive area, and recent Chinese military drills have put it back in the spotlight.
Indeed. It's a critical waterway, strategically and economically. Separates mainland China and Taiwan.
What are its key features?
It connects the South China Sea and the East China Sea. Width varies, about 180 kilometers at its widest, 130 kilometers at the narrowest. average depth around 70 meters. It includes the Penghu or Pescadores Islands, controlled by Taiwan.
Historically known as Formosa Strait, too, right?
Yes, from the old Portuguese name for Taiwan.
And its importance today: fishing, shipping.
Both are huge.
Yeah.
It's a major fishing ground for China. But its role in global trade is massive. Estimates suggest nearly 40% of the world's container ships pass through it each year.
40%. So any disruption there has global consequences.
Absolutely. Huge impact on supply chains. And historically, it's been a flashpoint since the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, becoming the de facto boundary.
There were specific crises, weren't there, in the 50s?
Yes. The Taiwan Strait crises of 1954-55 and 1958 saw major tensions, artillery bombardments by the PRC, and significant U.S. involvement to deter escalation. It highlights the long history of tension in the region.
Okay, from a geopolitical hotspot to a rare wildlife sighting. The Indian Giant Flying Squirrel in Uttarakhand.
Yes, a sighting reported in Ranniket. Always excited to get confirmation of these elusive creatures.
They're quite large for squirrels, right? And they glide, not fly.
Exactly. Body length, 30-45 centimeters, plus a tail up to 60 centimeters. Distinctive rufous-brown fur, gray underneath, big eyes for nocturnal life. And that patagium, the skin membrane between wrists and ankles, lets them glide, sometimes up to 60 meters between trees.
Where do they typically live?
Tropical and subtropical forests, mainly central and southern India. They like forest edges, dense tree cover.
What do they eat?
Mostly fruits, nuts, leaves, bark. They play a role in seed dispersal because of this.
And they're active at night.
Strictly nocturnal and arboreal tree dwelling. They're prey for owls and apparently have specific alarm calls for them.
Ecologically important, then.
Definitely. As seed dispersers and part of the forest food web, they can be considered a keystone species for their habitat.
How are they protected? What's their conservation status?
They're listed under Schedule 2 of India's Wildlife Protection Act. Globally, the IUCN lists this species as least concern.
But maybe more threatened within India.
Yes, due to habitat loss and fragmentation from deforestation, they're considered near threatened, specifically within India. So habitat protection is key.
Finally, let's touch on a public health issue. A spike in Legionnaires' disease cases reported in Sydney, Australia.
Right. NSW Health issued an alert. Concerns about potential contamination, possibly from air conditioning cooling towers.
So, Legionnaires' disease, it's a severe type of pneumonia.
Yes, caused by Legionella bacteria. These bacteria live naturally in fresh water but thrive in man-made water systems, cooling towers, hot tubs, fountains, even plumbing.
And it's not the only illness caused by this bacteria.
Correct. There's also Pontiac fever, which is a milder flu-like illness caused by the same bacteria, but it usually resolves on its own. Legionnaires is the serious one.
What are the symptoms to watch out for with Legionnaires?
Typical pneumonia symptoms: cough, fever, chills, headache, muscle aches, shortness of breath. Sometimes confusion, diarrhea, and nausea can occur too.
How do people actually get infected? It's not person to person, right?
No, it's not contagious between people. You get it by inhaling tiny water droplets, aerosols, that contain the Legionella bacteria. These can come from contaminated cooling towers, showers, hot tubs, etc.
Is there a treatment or a vaccine?
It is treatable with antibiotics, and prompt treatment is important. But currently, there's no vaccine available.
So prevention is mostly about water system maintenance.
Exactly. Regular cleaning, disinfection, and proper maintenance of systems like cooling towers, hot water systems, and fountains are crucial to prevent the bacteria from growing and spreading.
Okay, that wraps up our deep dive for today, April 12th, 2025, Part 1. We've covered quite a spectrum: social welfare, space tech, environment, defense, history, health. All vital areas for UPSC prep.
And remember, some of these might have felt like revision, which is good. It reinforces their ongoing relevance.
Definitely. As you continue preparing, try to think about the connections, how progress in tech might impact social schemes or how environmental health links to public health.
That interconnectedness is key. Seeing the bigger picture across these diverse fields is really valuable.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. We've talked about enhancing nutrition through PM-POSHAN and ambitious tech like fusion rockets. How might future innovations, maybe in food tech or logistics, intersect with these large-scale social programs in unexpected ways, presenting both new opportunities and perhaps new challenges for India's development goals?
That's an interesting point to consider, the interplay between different sectors.
Something to think about. For now, make sure you like and subscribe to The Deep Dive so you don't miss our future insights and analyses. We'll be back soon.